Hey, what's going on, guys? Good morning, everybody. What's happening, YouTube? You guys have tuned into Rules for Rebels. I got my morning coffee here. I got a little bit of time to kill, and I figure we would knock out a quick video. I kind of talked about how something I'm going to kind of try out doing here is finding like articles on kind of trending topics, business stories about the economy, using that as kind of the basis or talking points for a video. And then just kind of shooting the shit and kind of spitballing and kind of talking about some various things. So in today's video, we're going to be looking at an article from CNBC. The article's from the personal finance section, and it's titled "Unrelenting Inflation is Taking a Toll, Leaving More Americans Living Paycheck to Paycheck." This article refers to an August, last month in August, study from Lending Club that found 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Now, obviously, that's not the sign of a healthy economy when, a vast majority of people, 60% of people, are living hand to mouth, are living paycheck to paycheck. One thing that I'm curious about, we talk about this a lot, the media loves finding these narratives to run with, and I've been seeing articles like this going back to 2016, if not even further back, right? Like, how long have we been seeing articles? And if you guys watch my channel, you guys have seen me make videos about these articles for the past 5 or 7 years. The vast majority of Americans don't have $400 to withstand an emergency. The vast majority of Americans don't have any money saved. Millennials eat too much avocado toast and drink too many lattes, and that's why they don't have any money. We kind of have seen this trend for a couple of years. And so it's amazing to me that when inflation is running at, I know the government says 9%. In reality, we know it's probably 2 to 3 times that. When inflation's running at probably 25% and everybody before was broke and paycheck to paycheck and had no money saved, like, how are people even surviving now? Have they figured out ways to cut back? And as inflation gets worse, even the most vulnerable among us, at some point you run out of areas that you can cut back in. Maybe you've moved in with family, you've taken on roommates, you started eating ramen, and as opposed to eating fresh food. But at some point you run out of areas to cut. I think I've mentioned this in a couple previous videos. I've seen a couple different statistics thrown around, but you'll see a lot of articles these days saying, it's going to cost the average American family $11,000 more just to, feed themselves, house themselves, clothe themselves, heat and cool their house. It's going to cost $11,000 more in 2022 than it would have a couple years ago. I've seen other stats thrown around that say it's about $5,000, but whether it's $5,000 or $11,000, that's a lot of money. And when people are living check to check, where is this extra $5,000 or $11,000 going to come from? Another interesting thing just to kind of talk about before we get into the article, obviously culture war issues have become really big, arguing about whether Aunt Jemima should be on a bottle of syrup or not, arguing about whether the Washington Redskins should change their name to the Washington football team, because Redskins is offensive to Native Americans, arguing about whether there's 2 genders or 152 genders. The culture wars have really heated up, and I'm sure some of you guys have probably seen this meme or this image online. But there's an image. So 2010 was the year of Occupy Wall Street, right? And everybody hated banks. Everybody hated mortgage lenders. Everybody hated big corporations. Everybody was upset about, disparities in wages, disparities in wealth, corporations taking advantage of us. And then you fast forward a decade, 10 years to 2020. And what do you see? You see images of, Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan sitting on a parade float, celebrating Black Lives Matter or trans lives or gay pride. And it's just kind of funny, and it's just kind of odd, and it's kind of ironic that these same people in the streets who, were occupying Wall Street, these same people in the streets who hated Chase Bank, who hated Bank of America, who hated a lot of these big corporations that take advantage of Americans, these same people are out celebrating with JP Morgan and Bank of America. Yeah, gay pride, trans people rock, Black Lives Matter. And kind of what that's kind of getting at is, if I'm Jeff Bezos, or if I'm Jamie Dimon, or if I'm somebody who makes, 100,000 times more than the average person, I would much rather have the societal discourse be arguing about, whether Aunt Jemima should be on a syrup bottle, or there's 152 genders instead of 2 genders. I would much rather have people arguing about those things, which in the grand scheme of things are trivial and just lead to bickering and clown world memes. I would much rather have the societal discourse be around those things than be about, why does Jeff Bezos make more in 1 hour than every warehouse associate in the country combined? Because one of those things, again, leads to bickering and nothing. And the other thing potentially leads to Jeff Bezos swinging from a lamppost. So, yeah, as an elite person, as a rich person, as an uber wealthy person, I would much rather kind of stir the pot and support Black Lives Matter and trans people and pride parades then I would have the discussion change to, why doesn't Amazon pay people better? Or why is Amazon, monopolizing every industry and shutting down small and medium-sized businesses? So that's kind of an interesting thing. I saw another kind of interesting discussion the other day. People were talking about, and I think there's a lot of truth to this, here in the U.S., I think we have kind of a class system. We may like to think that we don't have a class system like India, but, we do have a class system, whether you went to college or not, what neighborhood you live in, what type of house you live in, what kind of car you drive, did you go to college or did you not go to college? We most definitely have a class system here, and I think the guy making $70,000, driving an Audi or driving a BMW 325, he views himself as living a different life in an entirely different class than the guy making $30,000 or $40,000 a year who's driving a 20-year-old Toyota Camry. But in reality, these people have a lot more in common. If you look at 99% of the population makes under $400,000 a year. $400,000 is basically the bottom of wealthy. So when we start talking about the 1%, the people making $400,000 a year, they're at the very, very bottom tier of the wealthy people. Obviously there's people making millions and tens of millions and billions of dollars a year. But the people making $400K a year, they're at the bottom of the 1%. And so the people 400K and up are living a much, much dramatically different life than the guy making 100K or 70K or 30K or 40K. And even though the guy making 70K views himself as a lot different than the guy making 35K and vice versa, they actually have a lot more in common with each other than they have with the super, uber, rich, wealthy elites. They're both one medical emergency away from poverty, away from living on the streets. They're both one job loss away from poverty or away from living on the streets, one divorce away from poverty, yet they view themselves as very, very different. And in some cases, they even view themselves kind of as enemies. Talking about job losses, I saw Stanley Black & Decker, which has a bunch of brands under them, a bunch of tool brands and things like that. They just laid off, was it 1,000 people or 10,000 people? I think they just laid off 1,000 finance people. So we've kind of talked about how layoffs haven't really started. Like, sure, layoffs have started in the tech and real estate and mortgage industry, but outside of that, we really haven't seen layoffs. Well, it does seem like the layoffs are now finally starting to hit other industries besides, the overinflated VC-funded tech industry and the mortgage and real estate industries. And it'll be interesting to see what kind of effect that has on the economy. It seems like everybody is waiting for a crash. Everybody's waiting for a depression or a recession. It's funny, I see a lot of articles, are we headed towards a recession? A lot of these talking heads, we're dangerously close to a recession. Dangerously close, guys, we are fucking in a recession. Stock market, is down dramatically. And even though job losses haven't hit, obviously the White House and the Fed tried to change the definition of a recession. I think we all know that we're in a recession. But even though job losses haven't happened, when everything's costing 25, 35, 40% more, people are going to struggle. And honestly, I would rather have a recession where we have 10% unemployment, but prices stay the same than this current situation. So we have plenty of jobs. We have more jobs than we have people, but these are low-paying jobs. These are jobs that won't pay you enough to live. And as the cost of things keep going up, who cares if you have a job if you don't have enough money to live, right? Like the more time goes on, the more you wind up falling into a hole. So I think the fact that we have jobs doesn't really matter if your job doesn't pay to cover your nut, if your job doesn't pay for you to have a roof over your head, for you to heat that space under the roof, and for you to put food in your belly. But without further ado, let's hop into this article. The article, again, is titled, Unrelenting Inflation is Taking a Toll, Leaving More Americans Living Paycheck to Paycheck. With persistent inflation weighing on consumers, the number of Americans living paycheck to paycheck is increasing, according to a recent report. The rise has been the sharpest for the highest earners, the report found. So I think the people who are broke were already fucked. Now it's finally starting to affect the higher earners. Here's one thing that I always kind of wonder about these studies or these surveys or these articles. What determines whether somebody's living paycheck to paycheck? If somebody has an extra $1,000 or $2,000 a month, if somebody has an extra $1,000 or $2,000 at the end of the month after paying all of their bills, and they wind up throwing that extra $1,000 or two into Bitcoin or into an ETF or into a mutual fund, yeah, they're living paycheck to paycheck in the sense that they're not putting anything away in their quote-unquote savings account. But the reality is that they do have an extra $1,000 or $2,000 a month of disposable income, and they're not broke, they're not destitute. Another thing, if these people earning six figures or above are classified as living paycheck to paycheck, but they live a very extravagant lifestyle, they have very nice cars, they have a very nice home, they belong to the country club, they have their kids in traveling sports teams that cost $1,500 a month. Yeah, technically they're check to check, but, if they had a job loss or if they fell upon hard times, you take the two kids out of traveling hockey and, now you got an extra $2,000 a month. So these people also are not necessarily destitute. I wonder how they're defining paycheck to paycheck when these articles come around. And if they are kind of defining it in a funny way, really all they're trying to do is create a clickbait title. But as of August, 60% of Americans were living paycheck to paycheck, according to a recent Lending Club report, a number that hasn't budged much since inflation hit 40-year highs a year ago. The number of adults who felt stretched too thin was closer to 55%, so it looks like we're only up about 5%. One stat that really surprised me is, I remember a while back, and you guys have maybe seen these articles or heard this stat, but they say among millennials earning six figures or more, I want to say 70%, 77% of them report living paycheck to paycheck. If you are earning six figures and you're living paycheck to paycheck, I think you have a budgeting problem or a money management problem more so than you have an income problem. And it used to be, we would say, as long as you're not living in maybe Manhattan or San Diego. But one thing that's crazy, with as much as real estate has gone up and appreciated, it's no longer if you make six figures, you're comfortable as long as you're not in San Diego or Manhattan. Obviously, we've seen a boom. We've seen cities like Bend, Oregon, Austin, Texas, Miami, Florida, Boise, Idaho. These cities have gone crazy, and you now basically need to be a millionaire to buy a home in a lot of areas that before were actually kind of cheap areas to live. Same goes for Denver or Colorado Springs. So that is one interesting thing with how much more real estate has gotten, and obviously when real estate goes up, it kind of brings up the cost of living in an area entirely because you get a different class of people living there. Restaurants start to charge more, stores start to charge more, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that is one interesting thing is, it's no longer just if you make six figures, as long as you don't live in Manhattan or San Diego, you're fine. There's a lot of other expensive areas of the country as well. Getting back into the article, even high-income earners are feeling the strain. The report found of those earning more than six figures, 45% reported living paycheck to paycheck, a jump from the previous year's 38%. So that's a jump of about 7%. More consumers living paycheck to paycheck indicates that many are continuing to lose their financial stability, said a new Nahar Lending Club's chief financial officer. And here's how inflation starts to negatively affect other areas of the economy. Let's say, for example, that, maybe I have, just for easy numbers, let's say that I, at the end of any given month, have $100 left in disposable income. And maybe I want to buy widgets. Maybe I want to take my wife or girlfriend out for dinner. We can use widgets for this example, or we can use a dinner out. We'll say a dinner out. Let's say a dinner out costs $20. So 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, right? 20 times 5 is 100. I can take my girlfriend or my wife out to 5 meals, and I can support 5 different restaurants. Well, when inflation kicks in and a meal out now costs $50 instead of $20, well, now, with my $100, I can only go out to dinner twice. So before I can go out to dinner 5 times, now I can go out to dinner 2 times. Before I could support 5 businesses, now I can only support 2 businesses. Well, now there's 3 restaurants. There's 3 local restaurants that I used to frequent, that I used to spend my $100 a month of disposable income on, that I can no longer support. So there's 3 businesses in my town not getting my business. How many other people are there like me? And all of a sudden, restaurants start going under because people don't have enough money to spread around and support all these restaurants, all these stores, whatever else it may be. Inflation is a persistent problem. The Consumer Price Index, which measures the average change in prices for consumer goods and services, rose a higher than expected 8.3% in August, driven by increases in food, shelter, and medical care costs. From what Jerome Powell was saying at the recent meeting, you really shouldn't expect inflation to start coming down until about late 2024, early 2025. And honestly, inflation isn't going to come down. There's certain commodities, certain things like gasoline that go up in price, right? Not too long ago, we were paying $7 a gallon, and now it's down to $4 a gallon. But generally speaking, if a clothing company, if a food company, whatever, realizes that you're willing to pay more for goods, what incentive do they have to bring the prices back down? So I think the best you can hope for is a plateauing of prices. I don't think you're going to see the price of a box of cereal or a carton of eggs or a thing of bacon come back down to 2017 or 2018 prices. Back into the article, although real average hourly earnings also rose a seasonally adjusted 0.2% for the month, they remain down 2.8% from a year ago, which means those paychecks don't stretch as far as they used to. A separate report by Bank of America found that 71% of workers feel their pay isn't keeping up with the cost of living, bringing the number of people who feel financially secure to a 5-year low. Many Americans are dipping into their cash reserves, and nearly half are falling deeper into debt. We're seeing people take on more credit card debt, and I think I talked in a recent article, a lot more people are using these buy now, pay later services. People are even starting to use buy now, pay later services like Sezzle, Affirm, Afterpay, Klarna, even to buy groceries. And this could wind up being another debt bubble because this is unsecured debt. This is debt that doesn't show up on your credit report, and will buy now, pay later services typically limits you to a couple $100 to a couple $1,000. There are some out there. I think Bread will give you 10 to 15 grand. I think Affirm or Afterpay, one of those will give you like 17 grand. A lot of other ones will give you anywhere from a couple $100 to as much as $1,500. So potentially you could run around using 4 or 5 buy now, pay later services, rack up, probably somewhere between $20 and $50,000 worth of debt. And if you go to get a car loan, if you go to get a mortgage, this debt is not going to show up on your credit report. Back into the article, it's no secret that prices have been increasing for everyday Americans, not only in the goods and services they purchase, but also in the interest rates they're paying to fund their lives, he said. This can have detrimental consequences for someone who pays the minimum amount on their credit cards every month. For its part, the Federal Reserve hiked its target federal funds rate by 0.75 percentage points. For the 3rd time in a row to calm down runaway inflation, the bank has indicated that even more increases are coming until inflation shows a clear sign of pullback. So, when inflation is at 9%, but you have interest rates lower than 9%, that's not going to stop inflation. Back in the 80s, our government or the Fed played this game where they would, raise interest rates and then lower interest rates, raise interest rates and then lower interest rates, and it basically just created a yo-yo effect. It didn't have the desired outcome, and then I believe it was, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was Volcker who came in and jacked rates to like 20%, and that's ultimately what it took to calm down inflation. Jerome Powell seems either unwilling to do that or realizes, the entire system would crash if he did that. I'm not really sure which, but we're probably not going to wind up seeing that happen. I meant to kind of tie in the whole FIRE movement thing into this video. I don't know how many of you guys are into the FIRE movement. FIRE movement is an acronym for, or stands for, Financial Independence, Retiring Early. Even if you don't want to retire early, I oftentimes like to say the FIRE movement should be broken into 2 parts. The FI, which is financial independence. Everybody should be striving to be financially independent. It gives you choices, it gives you options, and it gives you power. The RE, the retiring early part, is optional, but I feel like everybody should strive for financial independence. The FIRE movement is basically based on the principle that You want to try to save and invest as much money as possible. If possible, you try to live off 50% of your income. You want to, it's not about cutting all the fun and all the spending out of your life. You want to figure out what things in life bring you joy, what things in life bring you value. You want to spend on those things, and then other things that don't bring you value or don't bring you joy or that you don't really care about, but you just spend to spend or spend out of habit. You cut in those areas mercilessly. So the FIRE, kind of the whole premise of the FIRE movement is the Trinity study, the 4% rule, which basically states that if you save 25 times your yearly expenses, so, if it cost me 50 grand a year to live, 25 times that is 1.25 million, 1,250,000. If you save that much money and have it invested, on average, the stock market returns 8 to 12%. We'll say 8%. Inflation, even though the government says it's at 2%, they kind of peg it at 4%. So of that 8% gain you have every year, 4% is eaten up by inflation. And if you can live off of the other 4%, you can retire early. But with inflation going as crazy as it's been going, people who are earlier in their FIRE journey, they're not able to live off 50% of their income. So this is stopping people from potentially reaching FIRE. And people who have already retired early and had thought that the Trinity study or the 4% rule would save them, even if your accounts are making 4% a year, when inflation is running, according to the government, 9% per year, according to what most of us actually see in the real world, 18 to 24% per year, if not higher. Obviously those numbers aren't really going to jive. So I was going to title this video, inflation has killed the FIRE movement, or Jay Powell has killed the FIRE movement. But I just kind of wanted to throw that in at the end. But would love to hear your guys' thoughts on this. Are you guys seeing people in your life, people in your community struggling? Are you surprised that people aren't really struggling, despite the fact that we've been told that everybody's broke for so long and that the cost of living has gotten considerably higher? Would love to hear kind of your guys' experiences, your guys' thoughts, your guys' opinions on this. It was only once, I think, throughout the past couple years have I actually heard, I shouldn't say that. I guess here and there I hear some friends and family members and things like that say that they're struggling. But a lot of the people, one of the people that I hear talk about how they're struggling, they also recently went out for a $2,000 dinner at a Michelin restaurant. They're going on vacations left and right. So if you're irresponsible with your money and you're struggling, I don't necessarily have as much sympathy or empathy for you. But if you're financially responsible and are still struggling, that's tough. And I think I heard, the first person in my, in real life or near to me, kind of mentioned that, the paychecks just aren't working out. I'm 4 days away from payday, and I've run out of money, so I wind up having to put something on credit or dip into savings. And, the next pay period, I'm already behind the 8 ball. I'm already short $400. I don't have enough money to go between, to last from check to check. And then I really don't have the savings to be constantly kind of digging into to bail myself out. But at this point, I'm kind of rambling. I've run out of things to say. So we're going to kind of cut the video short here. Would love to hear your guys' thoughts. Drop your comments down below. If you guys enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed to the channel, click that subscribe button down below and ring the bell, and I will catch you guys on the next video.